Pam Bondi walks into a heated interview with Miles Renick, and it gets wild. Accusations, a protest video, and an explosive war of words. But Pam's not here to back down. She flips the script, shuts down every attack and leaves Renick speechless. You won't believe how she handles it. Watch till the end to see who really wins this battle. Chapter 1. The calm before the storm. Pam's showdown with Renick starts now. Pam Bondi stepped into the studio, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Something felt off, but she wasn't going to let it throw her off. She had been in this game long enough to recognize the pressure of an environment meant to make her sweat. This wasn't her first rodeo. Her pulse barely sped up. As she glanced around, her instincts told her this interview was going to be a lot different. The crew was bustling with a sense of urgency, the air thick with the kind of tension you could almost cut with a knife. This wasn't just another political chat. This was a setup. She could feel it. But she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her crack. She took her seat across from Miles Renick, the host known for making careers crumble with a single question. He leaned forward, his eyes locking on hers with a predatory gleam. The man was a seasoned provocateur, always on the hunt for the scandal that would drive his ratings through the roof. And here she was, the latest target. Pam, let's dive right in, Miles started, his voice smooth like silk but carrying that edge that told you he was gearing up for a fight. Your office recently closed investigations into several high-profile donors. Care to explain why? Pam didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she met his gaze and said, "Those cases were reviewed thoroughly, Miles. No evidence of wrongdoing was found. Next question." The room seemed to hold its breath. Was that it? The audience was expecting fireworks, but Pam wasn't giving them the drama they were hoping for. Instead, she sat there, composed, calm, like she'd heard it all before. Miles, clearly irritated that his opening salvo didn't land, tried again, his voice sharpening. "Are you telling me, Pam, that there's no connection between these donors and the investigations that were quietly swept under the rug?" Pam leaned forward, her voice steady as a rock. "I'm telling you, Miles, if you want the truth, you should read the documents. Have you even bothered to look at them?" The tension was palpable. For a second, Miles looked caught off guard. His usual smugness faltered, and for the first time it felt like Pam was in control. The audience shifted, unsure of how to react. Were they witnessing something bigger than they expected? Was she about to expose the whole operation for what it really was? Miles, clearly annoyed by her calmness, came back swinging. "Well, that's a nice deflection, but the public wants answers, Pam. Not your rehearsed script." Pam smiled slightly, her eyes narrowing. "It's not a deflection, Miles. It's called telling the truth. Something you might want to try sometime." Her response hit him like a slap in the face, but he wasn't going to let her win just yet. The game had only just begun. "Don't think you can just brush this off," he shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're on the hot seat now, Pam." But Pam wasn't sweating. She didn't flinch. She was just getting started. The cameras rolled, capturing every moment. Pam knew she had a target on her back, but she wasn't going to let them see her sweat. She was in charge of this narrative, and Miles was about to find out just how tough she was. Chapter 2. The first strike. Miles Renick throws the gauntlet, Pam's unshakable response. The tension in the studio thickened as Miles Renick leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. The cameras were rolling, the crew watching closely. He knew the next question would land like a punch to the gut, and he was ready to see how Pam Bondi would respond. "You've dodged a bullet so far, but we're not done," Miles smirked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's talk about those closed investigations, shall we? Reports are surfacing that these cases were quietly dismissed, and some are claiming it was to protect powerful donors who lined your pockets. Sounds like a scandal in the making." Pam sat there, cool as ever, her posture straight and unshaken. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't here to get caught up in Miles' trap. She had too much at stake to let this turn into a circus. She exhaled slowly, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that said, "I'm not playing your game." "Miles, that's a complete mischaracterization," Pam said, her voice calm but firm. "The investigations you're referring to were thoroughly reviewed. No wrongdoing was found. The reports are full of half-truths and misinformation." Miles didn't back down. Is that really your best answer, Pam? You've got powerful connections, and you expect us to believe that all these investigations just magically fizzled out because nothing was there. He leaned in, a predatory glint in his eyes. You can't hide behind these excuses forever. Pam didn't flinch. She didn't need to. I'm not hiding behind anything, she replied coolly. But you seem to have a lot of questions without any real evidence. Maybe you should spend less time spreading rumors and more time actually reading the documents. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Miles looked like he'd just been slapped, but he wasn't done yet. He was a seasoned interviewer, and he knew how to push someone to their limit. All right, Pam. Let's say you're right, there's no smoking gun. But you know as well as I do that optics matter in this game. Why are these cases being swept under the rug? People are talking and they want answers. Miles pushed harder, trying to break her composure. But Pam was already one step ahead. Let's talk about optics, Miles, she said, her tone shifting slightly, as if she was gearing up for something bigger. You're trying to paint a narrative with no facts. You want to sensationalize everything for ratings. But that's not what the public needs. They need transparency, they need facts, not your twisted version of the truth. The studio buzzed with murmurs. Miles' smirk wavered for just a second. Pam had just turned his own tactic against him. She wasn't here to play along with his narrative. She was writing her own. Now let's see if you're ready for the truth, Miles, Pam added, her voice calm but loaded with authority. If you really want to go down this road, we can talk about the evidence, the facts. But I think you'll find your story doesn't quite match up to reality. Miles was clearly rattled, but he didn't back off. Oh, don't worry, Pam. This story's just getting started. Pam leaned back, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. The game had changed. She wasn't just answering questions. She was setting the stage for the fight of her life. And it was clear to everyone in that room that she wasn't going down without a serious fight. The cameras rolled on, capturing every moment. It was anyone's guess who would come out on top. But one thing was certain. Pam wasn't going to let Miles or anyone else define her narrative. Not today. Chapter 3, Pam's Power Play, the ultimate mic drop that left Renick speechless. Miles Renick had tried everything in his arsenal. The bombshell accusations, the insinuations, and the desperate needling. But Pam Bondi was still standing cool as ice, never breaking a sweat. Miles had underestimated her composure, but he wasn't about to quit. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, shifting his tone from the sharp challenge of the previous questions to something colder, more cutting. So Pam, let's get real for a second, Miles said, his voice smooth but carrying a hint of aggression. You keep telling us there's no scandal, no smoking gun. But the public's already talking, right? There are reports saying the investigations were dismissed, and you just happen to be tied to donors who were really interested in seeing these cases go away. That's a tough narrative to shake. Pam didn't flinch. She had expected this move. She'd seen it all before. Predictable, scripted. But it didn't faze her. Not even a little. She leaned in, her eyes never leaving his. Miles, she said calmly, her voice low but full of authority. You're fishing. The only thing you've got on me is a bunch of headlines and whispers. Where's the proof? Where are the facts? You can't base your entire argument on rumors and assumptions. The studio was dead quiet. It felt like the air was charged with electricity, everyone waiting for Miles to respond. But he hesitated. Pam had just turned the tables on him, and he didn't have a clean shot to take anymore. But Miles wasn't the kind of guy who gave up easily. He gritted his teeth and fired back. Well, we all know you've got a lot of powerful friends, Pam. You're sitting pretty in the system. So, yeah, maybe the documents say one thing, but I think we both know there's more going on behind the scenes than you're letting on. Pam smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile of someone who knew she had the upper hand. Miles, you really think I'm here to be your punching bag? She asked, her tone cutting through the tension in the room. I've been in this game long enough to know how it works. You're looking for a scandal, a headline to latch onto. But here's the thing, you don't have the facts. All you've got is speculation. Miles opened his mouth to argue, but Pam was already on a roll. I'll tell you this. If you want to talk about transparency, then let's talk about how much you actually know about these cases. Have you even read the reports you're throwing around like they're gospel? Or are you just following the same script everyone else is? The tension in the room hit a boiling point. Miles was stunned. The force of Pam's words cut through him like a knife. He had no comeback. He had nothing but silence. I'm here to talk facts, Miles, Pam continued, her voice steady and unwavering. If you want to play games, go ahead. But you're not going to get me to crack. The camera zoomed in on Pam's face, her eyes locked on Miles with a cold, unwavering confidence. The audience could practically feel the electricity in the air. Miles shifted in his seat, clearly taken aback, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat. So what you're saying is that there's nothing to see here? He asked, trying to regain his footing. Pam didn't miss a beat. What I'm saying is that you're looking for something that isn't there. And it's about time you stopped wasting everyone's time. She sat back, exhaling slowly as if to emphasize the point. Miles' face twisted in frustration, but the damage was done. Pam had flipped the script again, and there was nothing Miles could do but try to salvage his pride. As the cameras continued to roll, the audience could see it. Pam wasn't just surviving the interview, she was winning. And every second she sat there, calm and controlled, was another second that Miles Renick's narrative crumbled. Chapter 4. Pam turns the tables. Miles Renick gets schooled in facts. The interview had been heating up, and Miles Renick could feel the sweat on the back of his neck. He had tried everything. The accusations, the insinuations, even the classic video clips. But Pam Bondi? She was still sitting there, cool as a cucumber, effortlessly flipping every attempt to shake her composure. He had to step it up. This wasn't just any interview, it was the interview, and if he didn't land a knockout punch, he'd go down as a joke. He leaned in, trying to mask his frustration with a smug grin. All right, Pam. Let's talk about transparency then. You keep saying facts, facts, facts. Well, you're not exactly offering us any, are you? You keep saying the cases were reviewed and nothing was found. But where's the evidence that supports that? Or is it just a case of trust me, I'm the expert? Pam didn't flinch. She was done playing by his rules. She sat back in her chair, crossing her arms like someone who had already won the argument. Miles, I'm offering you the truth. But if you're looking for me to hand you a shiny piece of paper with a bow on it, you're not going to get that from me. You're gonna have to do the work for yourself. Miles blinked, clearly thrown off. He wasn't used to this. Journalists were supposed to be the ones grilling their subjects, not the other way around. So what, you want me to do your job for you? He scoffed, his frustration creeping into his voice. That's rich. Pam leaned in, eyes narrowing with laser precision. What I'm saying, Miles, is that you're missing the point. You want me to give you a scandal, a juicy headline, but that's not how this works. You're coming at this with your own agenda, not with the facts. And frankly, that's why you're not getting anywhere. The audience shifted in their seats. Miles was on the defensive now, trying to regain control, but it was clear that Pam had taken charge. The energy in the room was thick with anticipation. Could Miles really turn this around? Or had he just lost his chance? So you're saying the investigation was all above board? Miles shot back, trying to salvage his position. You really expect people to believe that nothing shady was going on? Pam's response was smooth, deliberate. I'm saying you need to look at the facts. Not what you want to believe, but what's actually in the reports. If you want a scandal, you're not going to find one here. You want drama, go watch a soap opera. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Miles' jaw tightened. He was cornered, but there was no way he was going to admit defeat in front of the cameras. You're not getting away with it, Pam. The public deserves to know the truth. Pam's eyes locked onto his with an unshakable stare. And I'm telling you, the truth isn't what you've been spinning. You want to talk about what the public deserves? How about giving them the facts instead of a made-up story? If you want transparency, Miles, start by listening to the facts. The studio fell into an eerie silence. Pam had just turned the tables in the most brutal way possible. She wasn't just defending herself. She was taking control of the narrative. And in that moment it became clear to everyone in the room. Miles had just lost the battle. But he wasn't done yet. All right, he said through gritted teeth. But you can't keep dodging the hard questions. The public's not gonna buy the whole nothing happened story forever. Pam shrugged, looking almost bored. I'm not dodging anything, Miles. I'm just not playing your game. And with that, she let him stew in his own frustration. The interview had shifted once again. Pam was no longer just answering questions. She was schooling her interviewer on how it was done. The real question now was, how long would Miles be able to keep up this charade before it all came crashing down? Chapter 5. Pam's ultimate burn. Miles Renick gets schooled live on air. Miles Renick was losing his grip. The smooth host, known for his sharp questions and expert manipulation, was now clearly rattled. Pam Bondi was hitting him from all angles, and he didn't have a comeback. The pressure was mounting. He could feel the sweat beading on his forehead, and the clock was ticking down. He needed something, anything, to turn the tables. "All right, Pam," Miles said, his voice trying to sound casual, but it was tinged with frustration. "I get it, you don't want to play the game. But you can't just shut down every question I throw at you and expect to walk out of here unscathed. People are talking, and you're not addressing the real issue." Pam didn't budge. She was unfazed, cool as a cucumber. "Miles, I'm addressing the issue. You just don't like the answer," she shot back, her eyes locking with his. "What's your agenda here? You want a scandal, but there's nothing to scandalize. You're digging for dirt, but it's not there." Miles couldn't hide his annoyance. He leaned forward, his voice now more insistent. "That's easy for you to say, isn't it? You've got everything locked down, don't you? You've got a powerful position, the backing of the right people. You've been in the game too long to care about what anyone else thinks." Pam leaned in as well, her gaze unwavering. "You think I don't care about what people think? Let me tell you something, Miles. I'm here to do my job, not play your little media games. You're the one spinning these tales, trying to push an agenda. I'm telling you the truth, but you're too busy chasing headlines." Miles clenched his jaw. "So you really think the whole public's buying into this nothing happened narrative? They don't care about the truth, they care about what's salacious. They care about what sells." Pam's voice was steady, cutting through the tension. "You think the public doesn't care about truth? I'm not here for your ratings game. I'm here to set the record straight. You want drama? Go turn on the TV. But you won't find it here." The room seemed to hold its breath. Miles was visibly irritated, but he knew he couldn't keep pushing the same line of questioning. Pam wasn't cracking. Instead, she was turning his accusations into lessons on transparency and accountability. He needed to shake her, get under her skin, but it wasn't happening. "You keep talking about transparency like you're the only one who cares about it," Miles said, his voice starting to slip into that condescending tone that Pam had been expecting. "You think your word is enough? What makes you the ultimate authority here?" Pam's eyes narrowed. "I'm not the authority, Miles. The facts are. And that's the problem, isn't it? You're not dealing with the facts. You're pushing your own narrative, hoping the truth will bend to your will." The tension in the room skyrocketed. Pam's cool demeanor was absolutely unshakable. She wasn't just defending herself. She was schooling him. And the worst part for Miles? He knew it. "What I'm doing, Miles," Pam said, her tone even but full of power, "is showing you that the truth doesn't bend. You can twist and turn all you want, but it won't change what's real." Miles was left speechless for a moment. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Pam to be so calm, so composed. Most people in his chair were squirming by now, desperate to defend themselves. But not Pam. She wasn't backing down. "Let's get one thing straight, Miles," Pam continued, her voice cutting through the room. "If you want to go after me, bring the facts. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing my job, and you'll keep making yourself look like a fool on live TV." There it was, the mic drop. Pam had turned his game on its head. The interview was no longer about her answering questions. It was about him trying and failing to keep up with her. And as the cameras rolled, the viewers at home knew one thing for sure. This was Pam's show now. Miles Renick had just been schooled live on air, and there was nothing he could do to save face. Chapter 6. The Justice Showdown. Pam puts Miles on blast, calls out his hypocrisy. The tension in the studio had reached a boiling point. Pam Bondi had already taken on Miles Renick's accusations head-on, but now he was getting desperate. He was grasping for anything that could make her stumble. But Pam wasn't just surviving this interview. She was owning it. She had become the calm in the storm, her every word calculated, sharp, and unwavering. Miles wasn't ready to admit defeat. He'd heard enough from Pam about facts, truth, and transparency. But there was one question he hadn't thrown at her yet, the one he believed would break her. He leaned in, eyes narrowing with a sudden intensity. "All right, Pam, let's talk about justice then," Miles said, his voice dripping with challenge. "You've been going on and on about how things should be transparent, about facts and accountability. But what does justice actually mean to you? What does it look like in the real world? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a lot of people are getting away with things they shouldn't." Pam raised an eyebrow. Finally, something that felt like a real challenge. Miles had underestimated her, thinking he could catch her with a broad question. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. "Justice, Miles." Pam's voice was calm, but her words cut through the air like a blade. "Justice is not about what you want it to be. It's about facts. It's about fairness. And it's about doing the right thing even when no one's looking." The studio fell silent. Miles was clearly thrown off by her response, but he wasn't done. "That's a nice line, Pam, but I don't see much justice in your office. Not when these investigations are getting shut down for donors. That doesn't sound like fairness to me." Pam didn't even blink. "That's where you're wrong, Miles. You keep talking about justice like it's something you can control, like it's a tool for you to wield. But justice isn't a game. You can't just throw around accusations and expect the truth to bend to your will. That's not how it works." Miles' frustration was palpable. He was trying to spin her words, trying to twist her into the corner. But Pam wasn't having it. She was too far ahead of him, too calm under pressure. She was laying out her version of justice, and Miles could do nothing but watch it unfold. "Here's the thing," Pam continued, her voice steady and sure. "Justice isn't about pointing fingers. It's about doing your job with integrity. It's about looking at the facts and making the right call, even when it's tough. If you want to talk about justice, then why don't we talk about the fact that some of the loudest critics are the ones who are too scared to step up and actually do something about it?" Miles opened his mouth to argue, but Pam wasn't finished. "You're talking about justice, but you're not giving anyone the chance to prove it. You're not showing people how to fix the system, Miles. You're just criticizing it from the sidelines." There was a brief pause. Miles knew she had just hit him with something he couldn't argue against. He looked like he was about to speak, but the words didn't come. Pam took a deep breath, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who had already won. "The question is, Miles, what are you doing to change the system? Or are you just here to stir the pot and make a name for yourself?" The studio was silent. Pam had flipped the script yet again. She wasn't just defending her actions. She was calling Miles out for his hypocrisy. And with every word, the balance of power shifted more in her favor. "Now," Pam continued, her eyes never leaving his, "if you want to talk about justice, let's talk about how we can actually make things better. How we can actually hold people accountable. But if you're just here to sling mud, don't waste my time." The room buzzed with energy, but Miles was left speechless. Pam had dismantled his entire argument with calm, calculated precision. And it was clear now, this interview was no longer about defending her record. It was about Miles Renick trying and failing to keep up with someone who had the moral high ground. Chapter 7. The internet erupts. Pam's viral moment shakes the media world. The interview had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. Pam Bondi had stepped out of the studio, her composure still flawless, her mind sharp and clear. She hadn't just survived the interview. She had dominated it. The crew was buzzing and the air felt charged. But the storm that was about to hit wasn't inside the studio. It was online. Pam grabbed her phone as soon as she stepped out, the buzz of notifications practically lighting up her screen. Her phone was blowing up, and she could already tell something big was happening. The clips from the interview had gone viral within minutes. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere she looked, people were talking about it. She scrolled through the posts, feeling the heat of the media's spotlight. One tweet stood out. Pam Bondi shuts down Miles Renick on live TV. Watch the masterclass in composure. There were thousands of retweets and comments, people praising her calm, her control, her ability to go toe-to-toe with one of the most provocative journalists in the country. Pam felt a surge of adrenaline. She had just turned the entire media narrative in her favor, and the world was watching. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her team, alerting her to a new headline on a major news site. Pam Bondi destroys Miles Renick in interview. A must-watch moment. She smirked. It was no longer just an interview. It was a spectacle, one that was making waves across every platform. But as the praise rolled in, so did the criticism. As expected, there were plenty of people who weren't buying her answers. Some of the comments were outright hostile, accusing her of deflecting and manipulating the truth. Others took shots at her for dodging the real questions, calling her a political puppet. But Pam didn't care. She'd been in the game long enough to know that when you stir the pot, you're going to get some heat. Yet, despite the trolls, the overwhelming tone was one of admiration. People were blown away by her ability to stay cool under pressure. One viral post even said, "Pam Bondi is the definition of composure. You can't fake that." And that for Pam was the biggest win. The public had seen her stand her ground without breaking a sweat. They'd seen her take on one of the toughest interviewers in the business and walk away looking like a champion. She was now a symbol of strength in the face of chaos. The video clips that surfaced online only added fuel to the fire. Her calm responses, her ability to twist the narrative, were being shared over and over again. Watch Pam crush Miles Renick's narrative in just 30 seconds. One video caption read, "People were captivated by her confidence, her ability to stay focused when everything around her was falling apart." Pam couldn't help but smile. She had been prepared for this moment. The media had tried to throw her off balance, to force her into a corner, but instead she had turned the interview into her own narrative. And now the world was watching it unfold. She leaned back in her chair, scrolling through the responses. The more she read, the more she realized. This was just the beginning. The momentum had shifted in her favor, and now she had the power to steer the conversation wherever she wanted it to go. As she scrolled through the posts, one thing became clear. Pam Bondi wasn't just surviving in the political arena. She was thriving, and the world was beginning to take notice. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. Pam's victory redefines the game. The dust had settled, but Pam Bondi's mind was still racing. She just walked out of the most intense interview of her life, and what she'd done next was unexpected. She hadn't just answered questions. She dismantled Miles Renick's attack, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but his frustration and her unshakable composure. Now the media world was buzzing. Pam had become the center of attention, her name trending across every major platform. Headlines were rolling in from everywhere, some calling it a masterclass in poise, others labeling her as the one to watch. She could already feel the momentum shifting in her favor, but there was no time to celebrate. Not yet. The game had only just begun. Pam stepped into her office, scanning the messages that flooded her inbox. The praise was relentless. People were already starting to view her differently. She wasn't just a political figure anymore, she was a force. One email stood out. It was from a major news outlet. Pam Bondi versus Miles Renick. The interview that changed everything. Exclusive interview coming soon. Pam chuckled. She'd already been approached by multiple outlets for interviews, podcasts, and opinion pieces. The media was practically throwing themselves at her. But Pam wasn't the type to get carried away by the praise. She'd seen it all before. The praise, the critique, it was all part of the game. What mattered now was how she played her next move. She wasn't just going to sit back and let the storm pass. She was going to control the narrative. And it had already begun. In the days that followed, Pam's every move was scrutinized. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages, both supportive and critical. But Pam had always known that when you're in the spotlight, you don't get to choose the narrative. People were going to talk no matter what. But she wasn't about to let the trolls win. She took a deep breath and stepped out in front of the cameras again, ready to give them something they wouldn't forget. "Here's the truth," Pam said, facing a crowd of reporters. "I didn't do this for the praise. I did it because the truth matters. I did it because we need more people to stand up for what's right, not what's easy. This isn't just about me or this interview. It's about showing that you can stay true to yourself, no matter what anyone throws your way." The reporters couldn't get enough of her. They'd seen politicians crumble under pressure, but Pam was different. She had faced the toughest questions, the most aggressive attacks, and walked away with her head held high. She wasn't just surviving the storm. She was controlling it. The video of her interview, now circulating everywhere, had become a symbol of power. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about strength, about resilience, about standing up in the face of overwhelming odds and refusing to back down. Pam watched as the media frenzy continued to build. But this time she wasn't afraid of the attention. She wasn't letting the critics define her. Instead, she was using the spotlight to her advantage, turning every headline into an opportunity to prove her point. Her message was clear. This was just the beginning. People want to change, Pam continued, her voice steady. And if they're looking for someone who will stand up and fight for what's right, then I'm right here. I'm not backing down. And neither should they. The crowd erupted in applause. Pam knew this was a victory, one that would echo far beyond that interview. She wasn't just a political player anymore. She was a symbol. And no matter what came next, Pam Bondi was ready to take on whatever the world threw her way. Because she had just proven that she wasn't afraid of the fight. She was born for it. The final knockout. Pam Bondi's unbelievable comeback leaves Miles Renick in the dust. Pam Bondi walked into that interview expecting a fight, but what she didn't expect was to leave the entire media world in shock. She took on Miles Renick's attacks with the calm of a seasoned pro and left him scrambling for answers. From accusations to explosive revelations, she turned the table at every turn, leaving the audience and Renick speechless. Her victory wasn't just about surviving the hot seat. It was about owning the narrative and taking control of the media spotlight. Pam didn't just win an interview. She won the game. Want more jaw-dropping moments like this? Hit that like button, subscribe, and smash the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action.